In the last section, we set up some configuration inside of our Docker Compose file for Postgres, Redis, and our server. We have one last thing to do. We need to make sure that we provide some environment variables off to the server service. So inside of our Docker Compose file, here's the server right here, we're going to add on another section of configuration to specify some number of configuration variables. The configuration that we're going to pass in here is going to customize the way in which our server behaves when it is started up as a container. Just in case you didn't go through all the configuration with me a couple videos ago, if you look in the server directory and find the keys.js file, you'll find a bunch of references to something called process.env. These are all environment variables. And so essentially, when the server starts up, it's going to look at its environment and it's going to try to pull some information from the environment. And it's then going to use that information to customize the way in which it behaves. In our case, the server relies upon these environment variables for deciding how it's going to connect to its instance of Redis and how it's going to connect to the Postgres server as well. Now, we've not yet gone through the process of setting up any environment variables through Docker Compose, so let's look at a diagram really quickly just to get a better idea of how to do this. Okay, so here's how we specify environment variables in a Docker Compose file. And I'm showing you some very fine-grained details about the different syntax that we're going to use. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the syntax that you and I are going to use most frequently. We specify the name of the variable, then an equal right here, and then the value that we want to set it to. This is going to set up a variable inside the container at runtime of the container. So what I mean by runtime right here is you'll recall that when we build an image, it's a two-step process. Or I should say when we build and run an image, it's really a two-step process. The first step is when we build the image. That's the kind of preparation part. That's where we create a new image. And then at some point in the future, when we actually run the container, that's the second part. That's when we actually take the image and create an instance of the container out of it. When we set up an environment variable inside of a Docker Compose file, we are setting up an environment variable that is applied at runtime. So only when the container is started up. So when you specify an environment variable inside of a Docker Compose file, that information is not being encoded inside the image. The image doesn't get created and have some memory of this environment variable. It's only when a container is created, an environment variable is set up inside of the container. And you'll see another syntax over here for setting up an environment variable on the right-hand side. You can specify just the variable name by itself without any equal sign or any value for it. If you specify just the variable name, then the value for this variable is going to be taken from your computer. So if you have some environment variable set up on your machine, like let's say some secret API key or something like that, that might be when you want to use this variable name syntax by just itself without specifying any value. Because then you don't have to specify or hard code in any specific value for the API key or for the environment variable. It'll be taken from your machine at runtime and it's not going to be saved along with the source